This video is sponsored by ZocDoc. Hallmark. They are notorious for their constant output of Christmas movies. Did you know that Hallmark also makes a lot of mystery movies? I did not know this, but the guys over on the Deck The Hallmark Podcast sent me the movie, The Jane Mysteries, Murder at Moseby, for me to try and solve. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to try and solve the mystery of Murder at Moseby before the movie reveals it. If you are new to the channel, this is how these videos work. I'm going to be watching this movie for the very first time, and I will pause at specific points and come back in here and break down my different thoughts, theories, and suspects for who I think did it, whatever the mystery may be. That way, at the end of the video, when we find out the big reveal, we can look back and see exactly how close or how far I was from getting it right. With all of that out of the way, let's jump into the Jane Mysteries, Murder at Moseby, and find out if I can solve it before the reveal.
I'm sorry to surprise you like this. I need your help.
Jane's past takes center stage.
Why is it you always look your worst when you see an ex?
Real quick, before we jump into the movie, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, ZocDoc. Look, you guys know me. I cannot resist a good mystery. Whether it's unraveling hidden clues in a TV show, spotting foreshadowing in a movie, or just solving the ending before the reveal, I am always digging deeper, looking for answers before anyone else. But the more that I uncover, I realize life does not just hand you answers. You've got to search for them. And that just doesn't apply to film twists. It applies to your health too. And honestly, the older I get, the more I'm noticing things. At the ripe old age of 25, little aches that I've never noticed before. Stuff that doesn't just bounce back the way I did when I was a younger man, 15, 16. When I was younger, I didn't think twice about my health. I felt fine, so I assumed I was fine. But now I'm realizing you can't wait for something to go wrong before starting to take care of yourself. But here's the real mystery. Finding a good doctor. Between endless reviews, insurance headaches, and trying to actually get an appointment, it feels more confusing than trying to decode a Christopher Nolan movie for the very first time. That's why I turned to today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search, compare, and instantly book top-rated in-network doctors in your area. They've got over 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty. Whether you're dealing with mysterious headaches, suspicious rashes, or you just need a routine checkup. My whole childhood, I went to a child doctor, and now I'm an adult, and I realized I have no idea how to find a doctor, and that's where ZocDoc can help. With ZocDoc, you can search providers near you, check real patient reviews, filter by who takes your insurance, so that way you're not surprised with an out-of-network bill, am I right, ladies? And you can even book an appointment. It's like getting all of the clues laid out right in front of you. No red herrings, no dead ends. And here's the best part. Appointments typically happen within 24 to 72 hours. Honestly, I wish every mystery was this easy to solve. So if you're tired of playing detective with your healthcare, check out ZocDoc. You can use the link in my description, or you can go to ZocDoc.com/ChaseBridges. Big thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. Now, let's jump in to the mystery.
So you two were together?
Do I detect a note of jealousy?
Absolutely not.
It's a thrilling walk down memory lane.
None of these things seem like a motive for murder.
Okay, I just hit pause at the 19-minute, 10-second mark because the screen went black, and I'm assuming that this was like our first commercial break. Because remember, these Hallmark mysteries are made for TV. Also, I found my hat. It's been missing for a while. I found it. So, what have we learned about this mystery? What is this mystery about? Well, I've never watched a Hallmark mystery before, but I am starting to get a little worried. I remember hearing at some point someone say, Hallmark movies imply conflict, they don't show conflict on the screen. And so I guess I just assumed that when it came to a murder mystery movie that rule didn't count, but We'll see. The movie follows Jane. She is the famous Jane from the Jane Mysteries part of the title. She is a famous singer, I think, but get this, she doesn't just sing. She also solves mysteries. Her solving mysteries seems to be tied in with like some sort of like foundation that she helps run. So it's like a charity that solves mysteries for people, I think. I don't know, but she is officially back in her hometown of Baltimore, where her old college boyfriend, Anthony, shows up to her house asking for help. He is a photographer, and while he was developing some old photos from back in the day, he found something quite mysterious. He realized that he had a photo of someone dumping a body in the trunk of a car. And he remembers 15 years ago when he was in college seeing something suspicious and taking a picture, but he didn't say anything about it. He just thought he was being crazy. But all these years later, he feels extremely guilty. In fact, he compares it to being the narrator in Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. The guilt has been keeping him awake at night. There are a lot of references to Edgar Allan Poe in this movie so far. Even the festival that he was at when he took the picture was the Edgar Allan Poe Festival. And now that I'm saying it out loud, they're in Baltimore, which I assuming is Edgar Allan Poe's hometown. Is that why the football team's called the Ravens? When's the next time the Ravens gonna go to the Super Bowl, Chase? Quote the Raven, nevermore. I'm sure that riled up someone. I don't know anything about sports. I just know that if you attack a certain team, someone will get upset. So in that bit, I was quoting the poem, and I was insinuating that the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens, the football team, are never going to go to the Super Bowl again. I don't know if that's accurate. They might have went last year. I have no idea. Anyway, so, it's modern day, but the time in which this picture was taken was 15 years ago. And we see this in a flashback. And what's extremely funny about this movie is we see the modern day version of the two characters, Jane and Anthony, and then we flash back to 15 years ago and we see the two characters again, and they look the same age, which is genuinely hysterical. So that is what this mystery is so far. This is all about Jane trying to help her old college boyfriend Anthony solve a mystery. The mystery of who killed someone and threw the body in the trunk of their car 15 years ago at the Edgar Allan Poe Festival. So who are our suspects? Well, we're 20 minutes into the movie, and this is everyone that we have met so far. This is Detective John Cameron. He is the police detective who is assigned to this foundation to help them solve mysteries. And this is Sadie. Now, I thought that Sadie was Jane's mom because they have the same last name. But then it turns out that Jane's mom actually died 15 years ago. And so that's not her mom. I don't really know who the fuck she is, which is weird because typically, again, I haven't watched many Hallmark movies, but even in this one, most of the time when you're meeting a character, they do that weird thing where they're like, Anthony, I haven't seen you since we were in college together 15 years ago. Where they explain all of their history and who they are in one sentence. It's like an improv game. In improv, you need to establish the scene as quickly as you can. So a lot of improv actors will just walk in and be like, hi, I'm Anthony. I was your college boyfriend 15 years ago, and I witnessed someone get murdered and thrown in the trunk of a car. I didn't say anything, but now I feel really guilty, and so I'm come to you for help. Your classic improv scenario. Anyway, yeah, we didn't get that for this character, so I don't know who she is. Then we met this guy. He is a singer on an a cappella team. All we know about this guy is he's a great alto, and he has stage fright. He's not sure if he's gonna be able to sing at the big festival coming up. I know what you're thinking. Chase, why is there an a cappella team? Thanks for asking, guys. So basically, Anthony is now a professor at the college in which they used to attend. And Anthony and Jane take the, what do they call it? This is showing my age. It's a roll of film, the negatives. They take the negatives in which Anthony developed the photo which found the picture of the person being put in the trunk of a car. They redeveloped the negative and they actually got a clearer photo. And in this photo, you can actively see that the car that the body is being put into the trunk of has a faculty bumper sticker. It means that the killer was a part of the faculty of the university 15 years ago. Now, since Anthony is the current theater teacher there, he is able to go into the school and investigate all he wants. But what about Jane? She can't just show up to her alma mater walking around asking questions. She needs to go undercover. So that's what she does. She goes undercover as the new singing teacher. So is there like a super sick disguise when she goes undercover? Is it like undercover boss where there's a bunch of prosthetics and stuff? No, she just changes her hair color to black. Now remember, she is a famous singer who is now undercover doing nothing but changing the color of her hair, like Hannah Montana, and hoping that no one in the music department keeps up with popular musicians. But, I mean, so far it's working out for her. Now, once she has infiltrated the school, her and Anthony are having a conversation, and Anthony tells her some of the tea about some of the professors who currently work at the university. Now, it's very important that I relay this information to you. We have not seen any of the people that he is talking about. That is why they are not on the board and they are not suspects as of yet. He's just talking about people. Oh, Mr. Genoa, he was laid off for skimming money from the alumni fund. Then there's Dean Simpson, who had a bad divorce. His wife ran off to Mexico with the contractor. It was so bad that he would show up to school late, cry hysterically, and not take showers. But now he's the dean. So, you know, it all works out. Mrs. Pierce was having an affair with one of the parents of a student.
They are the trust teachers!
Which is, you know, that's one thing, but she actually offered a scholarship to that student. The student, the child of her lover, that they did not qualify for. And that is something to be scandalized. Anyway, so, you know, Anthony tells him the tea about a few professors, which, like, I don't know if we're even going to meet any of them. So I don't even know if it was even important for me to tell you that information. What I will say is then he gives Jane a list of all of the professors who are currently working at the school that also have worked there 15 years or more. And that list consists of Professor Jacob Penn, Professor Yvonne Savage, Dean Simpson. Remember, he's the guy who didn't take a shower because his wife ran off to Mexico. And then Professor Levi. Look, they don't say the names on this list. He literally hands her a piece of paper. So I had to hit pause and like write down the names. But his was handwritten too, and his handwriting really wasn't very good. But I tried my best. Anyway, that is everything that we know so far, because that is where I hit pause. I have a lot of questions. There's a lot that I have no idea what's going on, but I think that I do have just enough information to start throwing out some theories, some suspects, and pointing out some of the clues that I've noticed. Because remember, we have to lock in a prediction for who I think did it, who I think killed someone at the Edgar Allan Poe 15 years ago and put them in the trunk of a car, which is wild because we have not met many characters, but we have met Detective John Cameron. We get two moments with old Detective John that makes me suspicious of him. The first thing that happens that makes me think maybe it could be John is when we first meet Anthony, and Jane and Anthony are going over this potential case of a body in the trunk 15 years ago. He very adamantly does not want to investigate this. He doesn't think it's a real case. He doesn't think Anthony's trustworthy because he's like, well, why didn't he say something about this sooner? It's been 15 years. Could it be a thing where John does not want to investigate this case because he did it and he's managed to go 15 years without getting caught? That's a pretty basic theory, but it's still fun, especially when we add the second thing that happens that makes me suspicious of him. Jane goes to visit him at the police station, and she's like, have you had too much coffee this morning? And he's like, no, I'm just on edge today. Why? Why are you on edge today, John? The morning after us taking on a case that happened 15 years ago. Could it be because you were the one that took the body and put it in the trunk? Huh, John? Why are you on edge of this morning out of all mornings? I watched you shoot 17 people in the streets last week. You woke up fine the next morning. But all of a sudden, when my college boyfriend comes and speaks to us about a case that happened 15 years ago, now you're feeling shaky in your boots, John? Also, in this scene, we see that John is actively investigating Anthony on his computer, and Jane is like, why are you looking into him? He's like, I don't trust him, okay? So yeah, I think that there's probably something to the idea that John could be the killer. Now, that would usually be like way too basic of a plot point for a mystery, and I would usually not kind of bring that in. It's too obvious. But this is Hallmark, baby. I don't know what kind of stories they're writing. But yeah, that's my first theory. My next theory is that it's going to be one of the professors on the list that have worked there for 15 years or more that we heard about right before we hit pause. I assume that Jane is going to like kind of go down the list of names and go and speak to each of the professors who have worked there for 15 years or more. And the only one on the list that we have heard about more than once is Dean Simpson, because originally we hear his story about his wife leaving him for the contractor and going to Mexico. And then right after that, his name is one of the names on the list. That's not the case for any of the other names on the list. So I'm immediately suspicious of that. Maybe his wife didn't even run off to Mexico. Maybe he killed her and then explained his disappearance by being like, yeah, she ran off to Mexico without me. And that's a solid theory, I think. I'm sure that we'll get some more answers when Jane goes and starts talking to the different suspects, because right now we've kind of just got the main cast and a cappella kid, which brings me to one of my other theories that it could potentially be. Now, I know that 15 years ago, this kid who's like 18 or 19 years old probably wouldn't be old enough to murder someone and then put their body in the trunk of a car. Definitely too young to drive. But some serial killers start early. I'm joking. I am joking. But I do actually have one more theory. My thought process is, this is Hallmark. What if there's not been a murder at all? You know, it's not like, I don't even know if murder's allowed on their network. My theory is, what if it's all a big misunderstanding? Someone was photographed putting some clothes in the trunk of their car that night. There actually wasn't a murder. And considering we're 20 minutes into the movie and we have barely met anyone who is not a main character, it's not looking great for finding the suspects. You know, like I'm thinking like explanation-wise, we've gotten a lot of information about Anthony and Jane's history. Maybe Anthony made all of this up to try and rekindle his relationship with her, because that feels like the most Hallmarky answer, right? It's always about a will they, won't they. And so it's like, oh, what if Anthony did all this for romance to try to get back with his famous singer who's back in their small town, the small town of Baltimore, and she finds out that he was lying to her the whole time. There was actually no case. And so that is why she decides not to go through with it. Right? That feels like a Hallmark plot point. So who am I going to lock in? If I'm being realistic, the theory that there is no murder or mystery and that this was all done out of love, probably the safest answer for a Hallmark movie. However, I'm gonna lock in my it was Detective John theory. Mostly because why is he on edge? What a weird dialogue to have randomly. But I do have one thing that does put that theory in jeopardy. I am going to be locking it in, but this is a series of movies, the Jane mysteries. There's more than just this one. I don't know where this one falls. I don't know if this was the first one. I don't know if it's the last one. I don't know how many there are. That's the hard part about doing these videos. I can't Google anything, because if I accidentally see a spoiler, then I can't make the video. And so I have no idea if Detective John is actually a reoccurring character throughout all of these movies. Because if he is, then he's probably not the killer because he's in the other movies. So I need some answers to some pretty big questions that I have about the series, right? Because I'm going into this mystery without the context that someone who had watched the other movies in the series would have, especially if this one is like later in the series. So I'm going to go and talk to the two biggest Hallmark experts that I know, Bran and Dan from the Deck The Hallmark Podcast. We're going to go to their podcast studio and see if they can help answer some of these questions. Mainly, is Detective John a reoccurring character? But I do have other questions, like who is this lady? And what is the deal with the foundation? What kind of charity like solves murder cases? So let's go and see if we can get some context that we have been missing.
Pretty sure I know who done it.
You'll never get away with this!
Guys, this is Deck the Hallmark. This is Dan and Bran. You have watched every Hallmark movie ever made.
Well, from the last 6 years, yes.
Pretty close.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
But for the clickbait of the video, you guys have watched everyone ever made. There's a series. The Jane Mysteries is a series, and you guys have seen the other ones, right?
Yeah.
What number in the order of the movies is this one? Did this one come out?
3 or 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's number 3.
3. Yeah.
Okay. In the first 2.
Which is always when you want to jump into it.
Yeah, of course.
Third mystery.
Yeah. And this is what will help me solve the mystery, because I think I've got my hand on the pulse.
Oh, okay.
But I have a few questions that'll help me narrow things down. The first one being Detective John.
Yeah.
He is the detective character in the movie. Is he in the first 2 movies?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Stephen Hazar is in all of the movies.
He's not new.
He's not a new character. This is an ongoing. What the Hallmark mysteries do is they give you possible love interest with the murder solver and some sort of law enforcement agent.
My next question, I don't know how her mom died, but I do know her mom died at the Edgar Allan Poe Festival 15 years ago, the same night.
Yeah.
But she's been talking to this old lady at the foundation. Who is this old lady if it's not her mom?
It's the ghost of her mom.
It's her mom's ghost.
Mom's ghost.
In the first movie, she's like a lounge singer, somewhat famous, not super
James,
famous.
that was my next question.
Right. So she's this singer.
I think she was like over
she's in Europe.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
Her mom dies, and I believe she's given this like library.
From her uncle, yeah. So it's a foundation.
Yeah, it's a foundation, and they help people solve like cold cases.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
And they just borrow a detective to be their like.
Well, that's
chaperone?
the thing about the detective is he helped out in the first one, and now he's just. I think he's
really into her and into helping out.
Okay. Is she a famous singer or not?
I think.
Yeah. Hallmark does this thing where they want you to believe they're famous but still working class. You know, it's like no one is like.
But this is why I assigned this specific movie.
That's true.
There is, and I'm not going to tell you anything else, but there is something at the end of this movie that I don't think it is humanly possible for you to predict.
I'm going to prove you wrong.
Okay.
Because I am the best detective. My last question, and this leads into what you were just saying. Do you think it's possible for me to solve it?
I just don't. I mean, maybe Dan.
So I do think
You're a smart guy. You do this for a living,
Yeah,
so
it's
I
true.
don't want to try to take it away from you.
I think you've got a chance. I would give you a 30% chance to solve it.
He's a professional.
I
He's
can
a
work with that.
professional. If you were a pro, if I hadn't been a loyal subscriber and watcher of your videos, Making the Merge, all the Chase Mystery stuff, huge, Pretty Little Liars, all of it. If I had not been a lawyer, I would have said your chances are under 5%.
Dan
but I know
starts
you.
every day with your YouTube.
Whoa, dude. That's such an honor. So you're a patron.
I'm a
subscribe to the
huge
Patreon.
patron. I'm at that high level.
Oh, well, there's only one. I only have one $2 levels.
This is you fulfilling that thing I give $100 a month for. I get to meet you in person.
Dude, that's so, I'm not here every week. Guys, these guys have a new podcast called The Diss List. My episode of The Diss List came out yesterday.
Yeah,
It's
we're gonna
out.
fight. We fought a lot.
Yeah, we did.
You didn't. I fought you. You didn't care. I fought you because you're doing. Tell them what your list.
Yeah,
is.
my list was top 10 Christopher Nolan movies.
Yes.
And I did not think I would be as passionate about these movies as I ended up being.
Yes.
So I'm very excited. If you want to go listen to that, you can go find it, This List, wherever you listen to podcasts. They also do the Deck the Hallmark podcast every single day. You guys drop episodes all year long. If you're a fan of Hallmark, or even if you're not a fan of Hallmark, like Dan, because that's like the whole
That's
shit.
my whole thing.
He hates them.
I hate him.
He loves them.
and I watch him for a living.
And I was on an episode of that too.
Yeah,
so
track
you
it
guys
down.
go find that one.
Synergy.
We watched Sisterhood Inc.
Sister Dink.
Awesome.
And you know the lead in that.
From being in Victorious.
Yes.
Great.
Just like how the lead of this one is Stephanie from Full House.
That's right. You're Tanner Twister.
You're so good.
All right, let's jump back in the studio and see if I can solve this mystery.
Big thank you to Bran and Dan from Deck the Hallmark. That was a ton of fun. If you want to see my appearance on their new podcast, The Diss List, where we're ranking Christopher Nolan movies, the link is down below. You can also see my appearance on their Hallmark podcast, link down below. All right, let's keep watching The Murder at Moseby and see if we are on the right track.
With black hair.
Should I do it for real?
Heck no. How does it make you feel?
Like a beautiful, passionate, intellectual woman, raven-haired.
Okay, I just hit pause at the 48 minute and 50 second mark. Like 50 seconds, not 50 second. Like 50 second. Yeah. We still have about 35 minutes left of this movie, but I think that we've gotten the bulk of information at this point. I should be able to make a solid prediction. Jane goes and talks to the list of professors that have been working at Moseby College for 15 years or more. And she thinks, she being Jane, thinks that she has figured out who she is looking for victim-wise. At one point, she asks the question of, who goes missing for 15 years and no one reports them missing? Because we found out that there have only been 4 missing persons reports from that time period, and all 4 of those persons were accounted for. Persons, people. I've heard it both ways. So what that means is whoever was killed and put in the trunk of the car that night was never reported missing. Why? Her and Detective John think it could have been an undocumented student. A student whose family was in the country illegally and didn't want to report anything in case that would cause them to get deported. So Jane starts going around and asking a lot of questions about undocumented students at the college. The first person that she visits is Professor Yvonne Savage, who is quite suspicious in their conversation. And we even found out that Professor Savage had a mental breakdown a while ago. Could that be because she killed someone and the guilt of putting them in the trunk of a car has been crushing her? Nope. We actually get an answer about why she had a breakdown. It turns out 15 years ago at the Poe Festival where this murder took place, she was served custody papers from her ex-husband. So not only does she have an alibi for that night, but we also know what her breakdown was about. So she seems clear in my eyes. So then Jane goes and talks to Dean Simpson. Now remember, this is the guy who didn't shower because his wife ran off to Mexico. But now he is the dean. And this is also where we learned that the 4th name on the list of professors who have worked there for 15 years or more, Professor Levi, is actually on maternity leave. She is actually the singing professor that Jane is substituting for, you know, undercover-wise. So that professor isn't even on campus. But yeah, that kind of eliminates her as a suspect unless she shows up later in this movie, but we're running out of time. She asks Dean Simpson a question about undocumented students from 15 years ago. He doesn't even answer the question. He just kind of shuts it down and is like, I think it's time for you to go. I don't know. That's pretty suspicious. Could mean nothing. Could mean everything. I also want to point out that in this scene, Dean Simpson is wearing an ascot. So I think he's probably the devil. There's only one man who's allowed to wear an ascot, and that's Fred Jones, baby. I didn't lock it in last section, but I'm beginning to think that there's probably strong legs to the theory that Dean Simpson's wife didn't run away to Mexico and that he actually killed her and put her in the trunk of the car. I don't know. Jane goes and speaks to the next person on the list. That would be Professor Penn. He has a pretty clean alibi. At that time, he was in charge of the dormitories. He's not British. I don't know why I did that. But he was in charge of the dorms at that time. And so right after the festival ended, he had to go and chaperone the dorms. Now, I don't know what kind of person is watching this video right now. You're probably saying, why does the dorms need a chaperone? I was also asking that. But yeah, he was chaperoning the dorms right after the festival that night, and I imagine that there is documentation of that or some sort. So it probably gives him a clean alibi that he wasn't driving away from the festival with a body in the trunk. He also gives her a bunch of photos from all of the previous 15 Poe festivals, including photos from that night. I think that that is going to be a big deal to the reveal. Oh, and he also... Oh, get this, and I didn't even bring this up earlier because I made a mistake. So Professor Penn, in his office, has the same exact Raven mask that the person putting the body in the trunk of the car was wearing in the photograph from 15 years ago. Now, I forgot to mention that the person putting the body in the trunk was wearing a Raven mask. And I forgot that because I didn't notice it. But yeah, Professor Penn has the same exact one in his classroom. Very suspicious. But Anthony even points out, you can get that Raven mask anywhere. Plus, it was an Edgar Allan Poe festival, so we also find out some information that all of the spoken word performers that night were wearing the very same Raven mask. So I guess it narrows it down a little bit, but there's still a lot of people with Raven masks from that night. It doesn't immediately put the blame on Professor Penn. And another thing is like, oh, well, all the spoken word performers had this mask, but it's not logical to be looking for a student, right? Because 15 years have gone by. That student would not be anywhere at Moseby College unless they were a student 15 years ago and a teacher there now. That's right, Anthony. Now hear me out. It would be extremely dumb if Anthony was the killer, because he is the one who took the photo of the killer putting the body in the trunk. Some might say it would be impossible for him to be both the person who took the picture and the person in the picture. Also, if you committed a murder 15 years ago and not a single person has ever brought it up once, and then you go to your ex-college girlfriend 15 years after you last saw her and you bring it up, you have got to be one of the top 10 worst murderers of all time. I don't know the other 9 on that list, Anthony. I think you're number 1. And then Anthony's like, Chase, why are you accusing me and yelling at me? I don't know. I brought up a theory and then immediately yelled at the theory. That's on me. I shouldn't have even brought it up. Yeah, anyway, Jane now has a master key to the entire university, thanks to a secretary who loves true crime. That is this lady right here. This lady actually breaking and entering Jane's house, and she was arrested by Detective John. It's pretty wild, right? Must be pretty important in the movie. Not really. They kind of brush right over it. They're like, hey, will you help us figure out what's going on since you're the secretary of the admissions records or whatever? And she's like, yeah, I'll help you. Here's a master key. So now Jane and Detective John have a master key. They use it to go to the college at night and start searching through some people's offices. They go into Dean Simpson's office and they find a, what is it called? Japanese Daruma doll. Now, I don't know what that is or why it's important to what's going on, but they really make a big moment out of it. They also find a bunch of files about all of the professors at the university, including a file about Anthony. And in this file, it explains that Anthony was asking about Jane's whereabouts a couple years ago, which Jane does not like at all. This causes Jane to think that Anthony has invented this entire mystery up just to rekindle their relationship. Jane, I also had that theory, honey, because here's the deal. The night of the first Poe Festival 15 years ago, Jane found out that her mother was killed in a hit-and-run accident. And so, that very night, she goes to Anthony and she breaks up with him. We're done. I can't do this. Then she disappears to Europe for 15 years where she is a famous singer. Kind of famous singer. So, Jane thinks the whole thing's a sham, calls off the investigation, and says she's going to quit being the substitute teacher at the college. They're done here. Now, I think we all know what's going to end up happening. Something is going to happen where Jane realizes there is a mystery to solve, and so she ends up going back to the college, probably on the night of the Poe Festival, and then that's where we're going to get our big reveal. So, yeah, that's obvious, probably. But what is not obvious is who is the killer, and is there even one? I will say that we get a shot in this section of the movie where someone in a raven mask is watching Jane from like the bushes, and it's from their POV. So I think that insinuates that there actually is a killer and the killer is watching Jane. So who is this raven masked killer? So immediately my brain goes to Dean Simpson, because when he was asked about undocumented students 15 years ago, he shuts down the question. It's super suspicious. And then they make like a really big deal about this Japanese doll that he has in his office. I fail to see how that is important, except for like he's weird about undocumented students, and then he has a relic from a different country. So maybe that is tied together. I think that Dean Simpson is like the obvious answer, and I want to dig a little deeper and get a little weirder, right? Because when I went and talked to the Deck The Hallmark guys, they were like, there is no way that you're going to solve this. Dean Simpson is blatantly obvious. So I'm going to assume that that means that he is the major red herring of this movie. Red herring is, of course, a storytelling device used by mysteries to help distract you from what's really going on. They'll be like, hey, look at this super obvious person. See this? And it's a misdirection because actually the real killer is hidden back here in the background. So Dean Simpson, as the blatantly obvious suspect, I'm going to see as the red herring, so I need to dig a little deeper, maybe get a little weirder, and see who's really hiding in the background as the actual killer. And that is where things get a little bit easier. If we eliminate Dean Simpson as a suspect, there are not that many suspects left on the board. After talking to Professor Savage and Professor Penn, I'm pretty sure both of them are in the clear. And then there's Professor Levi, or whoever, who's on maternity leave, and we haven't even seen or heard from them. Pretty sure they're in the clear as well. Then there is Detective John, who, although I locked him in the first place because I thought that was a pretty solid theory, we found out from the Deck the Hallmark guys that he is in the other movies as well. So probably not the killer, because if he's in the first two movies, the first three movies, and then he's randomly the killer in the fourth movie, I don't know, that doesn't seem right. So who does that even leave? Well, we have this secretary lady who's obsessed with true crime. We actually see her commit a crime in this movie. She breaking and entering Jane's house. And she does this. She's willing to just commit a crime because she wants to investigate Jane because she thought Jane was pretty suspicious. In her defense, Jane was mad suspicious. She was just walking up like, hey, anything weird happened here 15 years ago? Maybe something off the record? And this lady was like, I'm pretty sure this is the famous European singer from 15 years ago. So yeah, I think maybe she could be the killer. I'm not sure what the motive would be. And she wasn't on the list of people who have worked here for 15 years or more. And then there's my Anthony theory, and that just doesn't, I just don't think that works. He can't take the picture of the killer if he is the killer. But speaking of pictures, remember, Professor Penn hands Jane a bunch of pictures from old Poe festivals. I think maybe that will be what causes Jane to jump back in on the case. Maybe she'll see something in one of the pictures that's like, oh my gosh, like maybe it's like a different angle of the body being put in the trunk, and she's like, I know what this is. And that's what causes her to get back into the case. Or maybe she sees a picture that's a better angle of the quote unquote body being put in the trunk. And so she's like, oh, this isn't actually a killer. Let me go tell Anthony and clear his conscience that he's been feeling guilt for the past 15 years. I just don't know, dude. Like, the logical answer is Dean Simpson. But my gut is telling me that Anthony isn't as innocent as he seems. Remember when he said that he has been feeling like the narrator from The Telltale Heart for the past 15 years because he didn't say anything about something suspicious he saw? The whole thing about that poem is that that person killed someone, hid their heart in the floorboards, and then went crazy from the guilt of killing someone. I'm thinking maybe he killed the person, has felt tremendously guilty for the past 15 years, and then decided, you know what? I got away with this, but I need to face repercussions. So he doctors some photos to make it look like he caught someone getting rid of the body in the trunk. That causes Jane to look deeper into the mystery, which will hopefully lead to him getting caught, and he can, have his conscience clear. Now, I know what you're saying. Why wouldn't he just go and turn himself in? Well, that's probably very difficult, right? To get the courage up to go and just say, hey, I killed someone. It's probably easier if you're jumping the hurdles in your mind. You're like, well, I'll just help this famous singer who has a charity that allows them to solve mysteries. I'll give them just enough to try to get me. And then, if she doesn't actually get me, then I did everything I could and I can feel better. But she'll probably get me, right? Yeah. Is that too stupid of an idea? Or do you think I'm cooking? I think I might be cooking. I mean, who else is left? The acapella kid? 15 years ago, he was 4? And then there's all this talk about undocumented students. How does that even tie in? At one point, Jane makes a claim that well, hey, maybe the school has been covering up this disappearance because they didn't want to face a scandal for someone being killed and going missing on their watch. Like, could that be something? Like, maybe an undocumented student randomly died at the Poe Festival. And Dean Simpson, who I believe was the theater teacher at this point, acted quick and hid the body in the trunk of a car because he was like, look, if we report that this happened on our watch, the school will face a lot of backlash. It could shut the college down. So he takes matters into his own hands. Then he feels extremely guilty about it, crying in class, not taking a shower. Everybody's like, oh, it's because his wife left him and went to Mexico. But really, he's just feeling the guilt of not reporting that this undocumented student died on the school's watch. And as a reward from the college for him being a team player, they reward Dean Simpson with, becoming the dean. Because it is pretty wild that he became the dean after being super late to class and not showering and stuff. And I like that theory, but it feels way too complicated because you have to jump a bunch of hoops. We would have to learn about an undocumented student. We would have to there's just way too many hoops to jump through. That's way too complicated. So really, oh my God. I have two options here. I can play it safe and I can do the obvious answer, which is Dean Simpson, because he's mad suspicious and he comes up all the time. Or I could try to do something weirder and out of left field, right? Like my insane theory that Anthony's the killer and has workshopped all of this to try to get himself caught, which, to be fair, also a pretty convoluted mystery solution. Oh, man. I thought about maybe accusing the true crime lady because that theory felt pretty, at least more simple than the other options. But dude, you know what? This is Hallmark we're talking about. It's all about romance. And there's only one of these theories that have to do with romance, and that is the Anthony one. So fuck it. We ball. We're going with the crazy theory that Anthony has done all of this in an effort to get caught for his crimes from 15 years ago. And also, at the end of this movie, it's either Jane and Anthony kiss or they don't. And if they're not going to kiss, then I imagine it's because he's a killer and she ain't going to kiss a killer, son. Okay, that's what I'm locking in. Let's go watch the next chunk of the movie and see what's up.
But do I look like a visiting vocal arts professor?
You have me fooled. Now we just have to pick out the right clothes.
Okay, everybody, I just hit pause at the 1 hour, 10 minute, and 47 second mark because something absolutely insane just happened, and I'm pretty sure that when I hit play, we're going to be getting the big reveal. So this is our very last chance to lock in the correct answer before the reveal. We also get a ton of information in this new part. It's almost like they waited until the last 30 minutes or whatever to really start giving us a bunch of information. So basically what has happened is Jane quits the case. Then she moves on to an entirely different missing persons case. There was a missing Japanese woman who was in the country illegally. Now, I wonder if this woman has anything to do with the other case that this entire movie has been about. Is it crazy for me to assume that they might be connected in some shape or form? When our other case is something about an undocumented student. And then Jane's like, man, this ain't a real case. Oh, and remember in our other case, how Dean Simpson has a Japanese doll in his office? Too bad we couldn't solve that other case. But no, it turns out that they are connected. The missing Japanese woman was named Nami, but she was in the country under the pseudonym Hana. And Hana worked at Moseby College in the dining room. And when Jane gets a hold of some of the old security tapes from 15 years ago from the true crime lady, she sees footage of Dean Simpson kissing Hana. And then the two of them start to argue. Now, Hana, or Nami, depending on which name you want to use, has not spoken to her family back in Japan for 15 years. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that she's probably our victim who was put into the trunk of the car. And the number one suspect for everyone is Dean Simpson. Obviously, considering we have footage of him arguing with her and kissing her. And also, they can't find Dean Simpson anywhere. He's not at home, he's not at work. Then, at the Poe Festival, where Jane is back and she's there to see her students on, in the a cappella team, someone in a raven mask kidnaps Jane and puts her in the trunk of a car. The exact same car as last time, because we see the faculty bumper sticker. It's occurring to me as I'm yelling this that they could have just searched the parking lot for the car that they saw in the picture. Right? Anyway, at the same exact time that Jane is being kidnapped, we see Anthony in his dark room developing some photos. So, safe to say that it's not Anthony. By the way, Anthony and Jane and Detective John have all made up. They're all on the same side now. They're friends again. But then, Detective John is at the Edgar Allan Poe Festival, and he's like, hey, where's Jane? And everybody's like, who? And then he talks to Professor Savage, and she's like, oh, we haven't seen her. She's nowhere to be found. And you know what? We haven't seen or heard from Dean Simpson either. So we know that it is not Professor Savage who kidnapped her, because Professor Savage is still at the Poe Festival talking to Detective John. And it is blatantly obvious at this point that, the movie's practically going, it's Dean Simpson. So because of that, I think that solidifies that Dean Simpson is the red herring. If we're about to get the reveal, and then we have a moment where Professor Yvonne Savage is like, yeah, we haven't seen that lady. Someone must have kidnapped her, I guess. Anyway, we haven't seen Dean Simpson either. Probably not going to be him. You know what I mean? He's the big red herring. Secretary lady, she is actually the one that gives Jane the security tapes that shows Dean Simpson talking to Hannah and then, kissing and fighting or whatever. What if she gave Jane those tapes to put suspicion on Dean Thompson? She is trying to frame Dean Thompson for the murder that she committed. Then she kidnapped Dean Simpson to make it look like he fled the country because he's guilty or something. Because remember, no one knows where Dean Simpson is. He's not at home, he's not at work. Then she kidnaps Jane to make it look like Dean Simpson kidnapped Jane to kill her or whatever. So that way, the dean, when they get caught, the dean looks super suspicious, like he is the one who did it. But Chase, why would this secretary lady, why would she put someone in the trunk of a car 15 years ago and then try to frame Dean Simpson for it all these years later? Good question. Here's what I'm thinking. We know that she loves true crime. We know that she loves investigating people, coworkers, that she deems suspicious, because we saw her breaking and entering into Jane's home. What if this secretary had suspicions that Hannah, who worked in the dining hall, was in the country illegally? She's going to be a narc and expose her and get her deported. So she tries to do that. But then she realizes that she is in a relationship with Dean Simpson, which I guess at the time was Professor Simpson because he wasn't the dean yet. So then she starts blackmailing them for money. Then something went awry. She kills her, puts her in the trunk of the car. But Chase, this secretary lady who is obsessed with true crime was not on the list of professors who have worked there for 15 years or more. Exactly. That is a list of professors. This secretary lady is not a professor, but she is faculty. And the way that she talks about like parts of her job, like how long she's been trying to take care of the records and stuff like that, she has definitely worked here for at least 15 years. Guys, this is what I'm locking in, and I feel very good about it. Plus, the main thing, and kind of the main reason that I am locking her in, other than, the other stuff that I talked about, the biggest reason is it's no one else up here. I'm almost positive that it is not these two. Like, I know that we see her, so I know it's not her. And even this guy, like, he's up on the stage talking right before this happens, so I'm fairly certain it's not him either. It's none of these people except for possibly Dean Simpson, right? But he is the most... he's the biggest red herring, most definitely. So if it's not the biggest red herring where everyone's going, it's him, then it has to be someone that we wouldn't suspect, which is the true crime lady, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to be her aunt. How did my southernness came out? Her aunt. It ain't her aunt, man. Plus, I think the idea that she is trying to frame Dean Simpson is a really fun idea. You know, this is the lady who gave Jane the master key so that she could go looking into people's offices. Maybe she planted that Japanese doll in Dean Simpson's office. I think it's really fun. That's what I'm locking in. We're about to get the big reveal, so let's go ahead and watch the last few minutes of this movie and see if I solved this Hallmark movie before the reveal.
Well, what do you think?
I think it says you can trust me with all of your secrets.
Well, fuck, dude. It was Dean Simpson. Like, it was so obvious. I was like, surely this is just a red herring. I've got to stop assuming that these shows and movies are more smart than they actually are. More smart than they actually are. They're smarter than me, that's for sure. Okay, so here's the rundown of everything that happened that night 15 years ago at the first ever Edgar Allan Poe Festival. Dean Simpson ordered a mail order bride after his wife left him, and that was Hannah. And he thought that the whole situation was perfectly legal. And then he found out that her real name wasn't Hannah and that she was in the country illegally. And then the company that he used to get her to America started blackmailing him for tons of money, being like, if you don't give us money, then we're gonna report her to the authorities and get her deported. So he keeps paying this company money over and over and over again, so that way the new love of his life, Hannah, didn't get deported. So he's constantly paying until they're broke. And then she gets really sick and she's having to go to all these hospital visits and everything, and he can't afford it. And then on the night of the Poe Festival 15 years ago, she just dies in his arms. Just like backstage during a performance. Not just any performance, Jane's performance. And so she's dead. And he quickly puts on a mask and a cape and goes and puts her in the trunk of his car. Hey, buddy, how about you put her in the back seat, you fucking animal? What are you doing? Then he took her home and buried her in the backyard. He never reported the death to the authorities. He didn't let her parents back home know. So yeah, he's just confessing all this to Jane because he kidnapped Jane. And he's just, I cannot stress to you how bizarre this evil villain monologue that we get from this guy is. In fact, I don't do this often, but this is so bizarre. You need to see some of this. So here's some of this.
Whatever happened with the criminal agency?
They kept threatening me and collecting payments after Nami's death. Said they'd go to the authorities.
Tell the authorities what?
To tell them Nami had passed.
Wait, you never reported her death? So you just drove her home and...
I drove her home. I wanted her to be at peace. In the home that she loved. A home that we shared. She's in the backyard. Under her favorite raspberry bush.
So, yeah, isn't that insane? They arrest him. This guy, Detective John, arrests him. He confesses to everything. Guys, I should have just locked him in immediately. I knew something was up when he was the only suspect that we heard about before seeing his name on the list of people who had worked there for 15 years or more. It was like they really wanted to make sure you knew the name Dean Simpson. Right then and there, I should have locked that in. Oops. And then even towards the end, when it was blatantly obvious that it was him, when they said, yeah, someone just kidnapped Jane. Hey, where's Dean Simpson at? We can't find him. I should have just known this is a Hallmark movie. This isn't like, we're not dealing with Agatha Christie here. We're dealing with Stephanie Tanner, bro. I should have just went with the obvious answer. I thought maybe they were going to pull some wild twist, which they kind of did, because what in the world is up with all the deportation stuff? This ending was one of the most bizarre ones I've ever seen, but I had a ton of fun watching this movie. I had a ton of fun trying to solve this case. I didn't, which is embarrassing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different than what I normally do. If this video does well, I will be trying to solve more Hallmark mystery movies, because if they're like this,
I need to watch more. Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. I have links down below for Patreon, merch, and